this, the unveiling of this docuseries, I thought it'd be fun here to bring back the old Mount Rushmore here. We've done a few Mount Rushmores here on the Watchalong Wrestling YouTube channel, so I thought it'd be fun to kind of pick your brain. If you were to come up with Mount Rushmore, so it's got to be 4 individuals. We're not going to count the NWO as one, because I think that'd be an easy way out. I think you could use I think you can count a tag team as one here, but I don't think you can count a full faction, because if you count a full faction, of course the NWO will be involved.
You could just do NWO, black and white, NWO, Wolfpack, the LWO, and then there's got to be a 4th one in there.
I think there's the NWO team as well, with Horace Hogan and maybe the Butcher and all those guys. But yeah, no. So it's got to be 4 people you think about, and that'll be the only criteria I'll give you. Any 4 people. We can kind of go one by one on this. When you think of WCW, who would be on your WCW Mount Rushmore?
So, and I've actually been kind of trying to go, kind of go back and forth and say, okay, like, what does it mean to be a WCW guy? Because, from my perspective, I would want, one of my knee-jerk reactions was to pick Hogan as one of my guys. But, and, for all that he did with, Hollywood Hulk Hogan and with the NWO, with all that stuff. But knowing, kind of, again, like a lot of more of the behind the scenes stuff, and also kind of just more associating him most of the time with WWF, I decided to kind of leave Hogan off of this one, at least for me personally.
I like that. Yeah.
So I'm starting off instead with Booker T.
Oh, I like that.
As my 4th guy.
5-time. 5-time WCW World. I think I only did 5 times, but I'll spare you the last 5 times. That's a good one, especially because he really was WCW through and through. Obviously started out in WCW Harlem Heat, and then after he had became probably the most successful tag team in all of WCW history. Goes on to become the U.S. champion, eventually the world champion, and is the final world champion, leading WCW into the invasion with WWE. I think that's a great choice.
Yeah. I mean, just like everything that he did with WCW, even into the invasion and even into, throughout all of that stuff, he was there literally until the end. So absolutely. I feel, kind of got to give it to him there.
That's a great, great one there.
Go back and forth, or do you want me to do all 4 of mine?
No, we go back and forth. I think that would be good.
Okay.
And with me, I'll start with the man who I grew up always kind of being aware of this. Never a WCW guy growing up, never a huge WCW fan, just because I think my parents were always steering me away because I'd always get the WWE pay-per-views, and they were not about to start adding an additional pay-per-view every month. But for me, I was always aware of where WCW was and what they were doing. And when I think WCW, I think of the man who just retired not long ago during his final match with AEW. I'm thinking, of course, about the man they call Sting. I think of him as, Surfer Sting, and then, being able to recreate himself and reinvent himself as, Crow Sting, and leading to the biggest story, probably the biggest pay-per-view ever in WCW. Even I ordered it, Starrcade 1997. I know it ended up having some snafus along the way. But with that being said, I still, Sting is definitely Mr. WCW in my mind through and through. And so that is why he is on my Mount Rushmore.
And you know what? I'll just say now, I also had put Sting on mine.
Yeah.
I was kind of going no particular order here, but I was going to save him for last. But since you mentioned him, I would definitely put Sting up there also. And I'm also thinking back to the WCW video games. There was the World Tour, and then WCW NWO Revenge. And he was always one of my go-tos when I was playing those games. It also feels like, again, like WCW guy, because he was one of the few like big names that didn't jump ship until way later.
Right. I mean, way later. He goes in 2001, and he doesn't make his first appearance till 2014 for WWE. So he was really the last holdout there for sure.
But then, so I don't know if I should add my next guy then.
Sure, go right ahead.
My next guy is, again, another one that I immediately jump when I think WCW, one of the first guys that I ever watched, and one of the first wrestler figures that I ever got was Diamond Dallas Page, DDP.
It's a great one. Yeah, and WWE, another full-time, pretty much all WCW guy until he did finally come to WWE, and one of the few who took less money to come to WWE because he wanted to kind of make sure he got his opportunity. And, I'd say an inspiration to anybody out there who is always thinking about, maybe it's too late for me. He got to start way late in the wrestling business and was able to, reach the pinnacle as WCW champion. I think that's a great choice. And for me, I'm going to go with my next choice here on my Mount Rushmore, and I will include the aforementioned Hollywood Hulk Hogan. Too sweet, me brother. For me, I think Hogan jumping over from WWE to WCW back in '94, and I was watching in '94. Yes, I'm that old. And when that happened, I remember as a kid just losing my mind because it really felt like, all right, they're legit now. They got the biggest fish in the pond. They got the guy, the WWE guy, Mr. WWE, to come over to WCW. So I really think he legitimized WCW, and then I think his heel turn and then being the leader of the NWO was something that, again, really legitimized them. And I think the Hogan heel turn with the NWO is what allowed WCW to beat WWE in the ratings for so many weeks, head-to-head, Nitro over Raw. So that is why Hogan might be my favorite guy in the world, but he makes my Mount Rushmore here for WCW.
I feel like then I need to kind of throw out an honorable mention here at this point before I get to the number one. And you had mentioned tag teams, and I feel like that would be a good opportunity then to throw out the outsiders there.
Yeah.
Just because of, obviously, and again, my introduction to wrestling was a little bit later on. So by the time I started watching wrestling, Nash and Hall were already in WCW. They were already part of the NWO and all that stuff. That's how I got into it, or at least
that's
partially.
Interesting. Yeah.
So from me, they were always those guys. It wasn't until when I got older and realized, oh wait, they were in WWF. Oh wait, like they were big deals. Like they weren't Nash and Hall. They were Diesel and Razor Ramon, or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I definitely still think of them when I think of WCW, but my number one guy, whenever I think of WCW, immediately is Goldberg.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say Goldberg. Well, I think you've always been a fan of his, right?
Yes. Yeah, always.
Well, I think it comes to a couple things. I think we're both Jewish kids, so I think Goldberg just being Jewish, I think when you found that out, I think it was always like a really cool thing. I never really hated Goldberg until Hunter came out on Tough Enough, and he was like saying all those things. I was like, you know what? He's right. Screw Goldberg.
Definitely not propaganda. Yeah, sure.
What's that?
Definitely not propaganda. Yeah, sure.
Exactly. Well, and I'll say this much. I completely agree. He's on my Mount Rushmore as well. To me, the greatest created character in the history of WCW. Sting comes from that NWA era, so he's in there from that. But I think in terms of like created character, created great idea, because I think NWO, there was some influence from Japan for that, from Eric Bischoff. But in terms of this great idea, you have this guy showing up on the show as almost an afterthought. He gets the win and then suddenly continues to get wins to the point where it's like, hold on a minute, this dude has not lost. He's got this huge streak of 100 some odd wins and no losses, something that had never been done before. Genius booking, genius way to present him, and obviously led to, another resurgence. He's coming up the same time as the NWO is, and I think both of them led to the success, really, of WCW during the Attitude Era. So Goldberg is absolutely a part of my Mount Rushmore. If I would do a honorable mention, it would be to Rey Mysterio. I know Rey was never a top guy for WCW, but what I will say is the thing that drew me to WCW was seeing the cruiserweight division and these guys who were just unbelievable, like what WWE wished they had with the light heavyweight division, whether it be, Rey and Psychosis and Dean Malenko, Chris Jericho, Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, so many great cruiserweights. I put Rey above there because I always thought he was the most spectacular and way above his time. And I just thought also the costuming, the masks and everything really just like drew me in and gave you something completely different that wasn't happening on the WWE side of things. But for me, even though I love Rey, I was very close to putting him on there. Thought about Booker T as well. But if I'm going for my fourth Mount Rushmore choice, take a guess as to who it is.
So here's my I'm trying to think. Are we going like homegrown WCW? Or are we talking what he meant to the business, or are we talking about your personal favorite?
Definitely not my personal favorite. Now I gave it away, but it's definitely not my personal favorite.
And if it's none of anybody that I mentioned?
No one you mentioned, nope.
All right.
You would never mention him. You're not a fan either.
With all of those, well, if you're going to say that also, then I'm going to have to go Ric Flair.
It is indeed the Nature Boy. Woo! Ric Flair, Slick Rick himself. At the end of the day, Ric Flair was WCW before I even knew of anything about WCW, and comes over to WWE as the real world champion. And I remember my father, as a very little kid, when Flair came over to WWE, being like, we don't want this guy. He's WCW, right? And so, but at the same time, he was the WCW guy. He was right there with Sting. They had the last match against each other for a reason on Nitro. And I think, that's why I have to include him in my Mount Rushmore. So to recap, my Mount Rushmore: Hollywood Hulk Hogan, Sting, Ric Flair, Goldberg. Steve's Mount Rushmore: Booker T, Diamond Dallas Page, Goldberg, and who was the last one? Sting.
Wait, yeah.
Sting. There you go. Yeah, I was like, wait a second. So we were right there on two of them. I do like your logic about not including Hogan, though, almost turned me on that too, because I would have liked to include Ray, but I don't know if Ray himself belonged on the list as much as it was like, if you were to do it just like in silos, it probably would have been NWO, Cruiserweight division, Goldberg, Sting, something like that.
I was thinking, you could just lump the entirety of Cruiserweight division in there, just because, number one, anything that WWF had as a comparison with the light heavyweight title, it was basically a joke. It was meaningless. I'm pretty sure it just started as a joke when they gave to Gilbert.
Yeah, for sure. That pretty much killed it right then and there. But yeah, no, that was good. But yeah, good times on that. Great choices.
What's up, world? If you like what you just saw, now's the perfect time to subscribe to Watchalong Wrestling for more full-length episodes breaking down the world of pro wrestling, tons of wrestling live vlogs, retro videos, and so much more. Thanks as always for all of your support.